Well, good morning. I'm super excited about getting a chance to speak to you guys today. This is my home church. And years ago, at 21 years of age, somebody invited me to an event kind of like the one we're doing right here this morning, and my life was changed. Well, I want to just jump right into the story. It's found in Mark chapter 5. If you got a Bible or if you want to pull it up on your phone, it's Mark chapter 5. I love a good story, and to me, this is one of the best stories in all of the New Testament. So I'm going to read about 19 verses, so kind of bear with me. Beginning in verse 1, the Bible says this: Then they, that's Jesus and the disciples, came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gadarenes. And when he had come out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. In other words, he was demon-possessed. And he had his dwelling among the tombs, and no one could bind him, not even with chains, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains, and the chains had been pulled apart by him, and the shackles were broken into pieces, and no one could hold him. And always, night and day, he was in the mountains, and he was in the tombs, and he was crying out, and he was cutting himself with stones. And when he saw Jesus from afar off, he ran and worshiped him. And he cried out with a loud voice and said, What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you, by God, that you don't torment me. Because Jesus had said to him, Come out of the man, you unclean spirit. And then he asked him, What is your name? And he answered, saying, My name is Legion, for we are many. And he begged him earnestly that he would not send them out of the country. Now there was a large herd of pigs that was feeding there, and they were near the mountains, and the demons begged Jesus and said, Send us into the pigs that we can enter them. And at once Jesus gave them permission. The pigs, there were about 2,000, and the herd ran violently down the steep place into the sea, and they drowned in the sea. So those who fed the pigs fled, and they told it in the city, and they told it in the country, and they went out to see what it was that had happened. And then they came to Jesus, and they saw the one who'd been demon-possessed and who had the legion of demons sitting, and he was clothed in his right mind, and they were afraid. And those who saw it told them how it had happened to him who had been demon-possessed, and told them about the pigs, and they began to beg Jesus to leave their region. And when Jesus got in the boat, he who had been demon-possessed begged him that he could go with him. However, Jesus did not permit him, but he said, Go home to your friends and tell them what great things the Lord has done for you and how he's had compassion on you. And he, the demon-possessed man, departed and began to proclaim in all Decapolis everything that Jesus did for him. And everybody was amazed. Father God, I thank you this morning for the folks that are in this room, Lord, many people watching on TV and online. And God, I pray that your spirit would literally just explode this place to reveal who your Son is. Lord, I pray against all the forces of evil and darkness that would keep people from knowing the truth. Lord, I can't help but think about years ago when I was the age of many of the young people in this room, and how in one service, in one moment, my life was changed. God, I pray that you would do that for multitudes of people just like you did for me. In Jesus' name, amen. I've seen the face of evil. I've seen it in the legs of a young teenage girl who pulled up her pants legs and showed me the multicolored bruises up and down where her father had beaten her. I've seen the faces of evil in Mississippi prison when I was walking with guards to go along and try to share the gospel to people who had no hope, and they began to throw human waste at us and curse the name of Christ. I've seen the face of evil in Holman Prison in Alabama when I stood across from a man who stabbed a 13-year-old girl 49 times. But of all the encounters of the faces of evil that I've seen, one stands out more than any others. It took place in Kentucky when I was speaking at a school assembly. I was doing a secular school assembly, and oftentimes at the conclusion of the assembly, a lot of students will want to come up and speak to me. And I noticed this one guy in the background. He was many people back waiting on me, and my initial thought was he was wearing one of those, they used to sell these glasses. They were super thick. It was kind of like a joke that people would play. Finally, it was his turn to speak to me, and we got close enough. I realized the glasses were no joke, and I knew there was something wrong with the right-hand side of his face because it looked like part of it had been blown off. And he began to unravel a story for me that initially, I'm ashamed to admit, I didn't even think it was true. He told me about he had an alcoholic father, and how his alcoholic father would come in late at night and jerk him out of bed and oftentimes beat he and his mother. And how oftentimes when they would try to gauge when he might come home, and they would hide out in the woods hoping that he would go to sleep and they could sneak their way back in the house. And his father used to pull out a sawed-off shotgun, and he would often point it at his son and threaten to kill him. He told the story how one day, supposedly, his father said he thought the gun was unloaded, but it wasn't. And he basically blew the right-hand side of his face off. And when I finished hearing this story, I went to the guidance counselor and told her my encounter and asked if it were for real, and she said it was. The faces of evil. But I want to clarify this morning what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the face of evil in a person. I'm talking about what the face of evil can do to a person. And I think this morning, this story that we read is a good lead-in to what the face of evil and what it can do to somebody really looks like. I've got to set the table because we didn't have an opportunity to read all the story, but prior to what I just read you, this incredible miracle takes place. Jesus is in a boat with 12 disciples, and there's this huge storm that comes up. It's a storm that's so crazy that seasoned fishermen that had spent their life on the sea were crying out thinking that they were going to die. Jesus was asleep taking a nap, and they awakened him, and Jesus simply stands up in the boat, and he speaks to the winds and the waves and tells them to be still. Instantaneously, the wind stops howling. Instantaneously, the sea becomes as glass. And these 12 followers of Jesus, they could say nothing other than, who is this man? Who is this man that the winds and the waves obey him? Well, that miracle had just taken place, and the disciples have no idea that they have just come out of a storm, but they are about to go into a different one. What evil has done to this man is absolutely amazing. He's what nightmares are made of. He is the original boogeyman. According to what we read, and I only read it this morning in the book of Mark, but it's in 3 of the 4 Gospels, and we get a clear picture of what this man was like. First of all, we find out that he lived among the tombs. He lived in the cemetery. You can imagine tonight if you were driving through this city and you drove past a cemetery and there was a man who had no clothes and he was roaming around the cemetery like a wolf and he was screaming and shrieking. According to the story, we can only assume he has matted hair, sweat drips from his body. He smells like death. There are scars on his wrists and scars on his ankles because, as I read to you this morning, the local townspeople didn't know what to do with him. And they had tried to shackle him, but he had such a supernatural power that he was able to rip the shackles off of his wrist and on his feet. According to what the scripture tells us, his body was a canvas. It was a canvas of blood and scabs and bruises and wounds. And according to what Mark tells us, he was so suicidal that he had taken jagged rocks and he had cut down deep in his flesh. College students would certainly know what I'm talking about when I use the word a cutter. People who are trying to reposition pain, and so they'll cut. I've seen college students and high school students cutting the insides of their legs, cutting their chest, trying to escape the pain that's within them, and the only way they know to do that is to redirect it some way. Well, this man is the original cutter. He's a madman. He knows nothing but torment and suffering. And there's a few things this morning that I want to point out to you that we find out in this passage. The first thing that we find out is he is possessed by demons. We must be so careful. At some point, this man had, maybe a crack had turned into an open door. And where we find him this morning, they have literally taken over this man's life. And Jesus asks the demon within him, what is your name? The reply that he gives is, my name is Legion. This word could be translated warrior or soldier, because what he was doing is he was waging a war against this man's life. But we also know this word legion is a Roman military term that described a battalion of 6,000 soldiers. In essence, when he replies to Jesus, what he's saying is my name is Legion, and there are thousands of us that are inside of this man. It's amazing when you think about it. You know, the local townspeople must have thought that their battle was against this man. I mean, it didn't look good for the community. The children were afraid of him. Children were having nightmares about him. But see, you've got to understand this morning that our battle's not with other people. Oftentimes we think that. But the Bible says in Ephesians 6:12 that we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. It's not the opinion of your guest speaker today, but according to the Bible, that there is a war going on. And I know some of you may think that I've lost my mind, but do you realize there's a battle going on right here, right now in this room? Sometimes because we can't see it, we assume it's not taking place, but there are forces of evil and forces of good that are at war right now in an unseen way. There are forces of darkness that are doing everything that they can do to keep people away from knowing who Christ really is. Legion, demon-possessed man. We even find in Luke chapter 4 that there were people who were demon-possessed that attended the local synagogue. And surely I wouldn't this morning have to convince you of the presence of evil. I've met people that say, Jay, come on, man, demon possession's not real. Well, that's funny. Jesus sure talked a lot about it. You don't have to look far to see evil. It's every time you get on social media, you see it. Every time you turn on the television, you see it. You remember May of this year when Salvador Ramos, a guy who had been seen walking down the street carrying a bag of dead cats, walked into his grandmother's home and shoots her in the face. And then he does the unthinkable. You all watch the news just like I did. He goes to this elementary school and guns down 21 people, most of which were little children. No, evil's everywhere. The next thing we see about him, not only was he possessed by demons, but he was consumed by a literal and spiritual darkness. And there's something that you've got to wrap your mind around. And I hope that somehow this morning as you hear me talk that you're able to, in your mind's eye, see this man, see the condition that he's in, even see the tombs that he's walking about. He was surrounded by physical and spiritual darkness. Now the first physical darkness we see is that the cemeteries in those days were often carved out of hillsides, or they were carved out of limestone cliffs. And so it wasn't like what you would do today. These people would be buried in something similar to a cave. And so this man was constantly in places of darkness. And when I talk about darkness, some of you in this room, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because you're in the midst of darkness right now. There's things going on in your life, and maybe things nobody knows about at school, or your mom or dad, or in the football team, or another sports team. But it seems like that you're in this quicksand, that this darkness won't escape you. Now, all throughout the Bible, darkness always represents evil. It even represents hell. Matthew 8:12 says that people that reject Christ will be in a place of utter darkness. It represents sin. Even the devil himself is often referred to as the Lord of darkness. But conversely to that, Jesus said in John 8:12, he said, I am the light of the world. And anyone who follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Jesus made another statement. Many of you in this room have probably heard John 3:16. Most of you can quote it. But you know, in 3 verses later, Jesus says this. He says, this is the condemnation. The light is coming to the world, but people love darkness more than light because their deeds were evil. And then Jesus says in John chapter 12, verse 35, a very pivotal statement. He says, walk while you have the light. It's almost a warning. Walk while you have the light. For he that walks in darkness does not know where he's going. A little while is the light with you. It's almost as if Jesus is saying there's a limited amount of time for you to surround yourself with light, and you must do so while there is a chance. darkness. I tell you, there's three verses that honestly I've quoted them this morning, and they bother me. And this is what I do with my life. I travel all around, and I speak to everything from college students to high school students to NFL football players to winos to alcoholics, you name it, the whole gauntlet. And you'd be amazed how many people I've met over the years who had an opportunity to step into the light, and for whatever reason, I'm not ready, or gave some excuse, and it's almost like that the lights are shut off. Do you understand this morning that this Bible tells us in Ephesians 4:18? Now, I want you to hear this very clearly. It's very important to me that you grasp this. It says that your understanding can be darkened. It can become so dark you can no longer understand truth. Ephesians 4:18, having their understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God through the ignorance that is within them, through the blindness of their own heart. Ephesians says that your understanding, your ability to conceive the gospel of Christ can disappear. And then in Romans 1:21 it says this, because when they knew God, they didn't glorify him as God, but they became vain in their imaginations. Listen, I'm quoting directly. And their foolish heart was darkened. In the first verse, we see that your understanding can become so tainted, so blinded that you can't understand. And now we just heard in the next verse that not only can your understanding, but your heart can become that way. And what about 2 Corinthians 4:4? Satan is the deceiver of an unbeliever's mind. So literally, your understanding, your heart, and your mind can become so darkened by the forces of evil that you can't even see, you can't even understand truth. Yeah, this man, he was consumed by not only a physical darkness, but a spiritual darkness. I was doing some research when I put this message together before me and my wife headed to Colorado. Just let me throw a few stats at you. 1 out of every 5 people are considering suicide. There's 14 million alcoholics in the United States. 44% of college students are now dealing with depression. The list goes on. Rape, murder, incest, abuse, addiction, race wars. It goes on and on and on. This man was in physical and spiritual darkness. And friend, listen to me. It wasn't so long ago. I especially think about the college crowd today, because I was your age when I met Christ. I grew up in church. My mom taught Sunday school. You know, I'm a religious guy. And I was so lost. And people would often ask me, hey, are you a Christian? I'm like, yeah, man, yeah, I'm a Christian. And I was so spiritually blind that I didn't even realize that although I was religious, I was lost. I didn't have a real relationship with Christ. The next thing we see about this man is he was suicidal. Suicide at its core is the desire to destroy yourself. And a lot of people have a misunderstanding about suicide. Suicide is not the fear of death, it's the fear of life. Suicide does not end the chances of things getting worse, it ends the chances of things getting better. And we know this man was suicidal. I mean, how would you not be living in the tombs and in the darkness, and you're carving your flesh? It's amazing. I know some of you in the room this morning, you go, or maybe you're watching by TV and you go, man, I just don't relate to that stuff. Suicide, I don't really get it. Well, all the components were there in this man's life that you see among people who have suicidal tendencies. Hopelessness, torment, isolation, unaccepted. They were all there. And you know what? I love what Jesus said. Because of my own story, I've talked about this so much. I've been invited to speak all over the world about suicide because of my own story. But I love what Jesus says about this. He talks about the forces of evil and himself in the same verse in John 10:10. He says the thief represents the devil. He said the thief comes to kill and steal and destroy. In other words, Jesus gave the mission statement for the forces of evil: kill, steal, destroy. But he said, I've come that you might have life, and you might have it abundantly. Next month, I'll be speaking to somewhere between 26,000 and 28,000 college students. I was invited there last year. I'll be going back again next month. Last year when I was there and when I got finished speaking, my daughter who was there could tell you I'm not exaggerating. When I got finished speaking, the line of college students that were waiting to speak to me when I got done would have been from here all the way to that back door and at least back here. I stood for 2 hours talking to students that were in college. And you know those two common denominators that I heard over and over and over and over and over. Number one is depression. By the way, depression is the leading disease worldwide. And you know what the second one I heard? Thoughts of suicide, thoughts of ending my life, feeling of hopelessness, nowhere to turn, nowhere to go. When I was 21 years of age, I took out a gun, literally a few blocks from where we're standing. I grew up in a home with a successful father, mom and dad. I should have been a success, and I ended up 21 years of age, no job, no car, no girlfriend, college dropout. Just a few blocks from where you're sitting right now, just right here on Broad and Holiday, I lived in an $80 a month rent house. We had no air conditioner, no lock on the front door. I used to look in the mirror. I'm being honest with you. My wife and I were talking about this on the way to Colorado about a week and a half ago, and I don't know why we got in this conversation about my life before I met Jesus, and it just took me back to how stuck I felt. And I just hated who I had become. I literally used to look in the mirror and scream, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. Such a place of darkness. Such a place of inescape, it seemed. Seemed the future was so bleak, and I would look in the mirror and say, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you, and finally I took out a gun to end my life. I understand what this man must have felt. Some people go, well, Jay, I just don't get it. But there's many of you that do. Many of you that do. It's a pandemic that affects people worldwide. You know, and I think that the illustration I've given, I was invited by a guy flew down from London a couple of days ago to interview me in the Dallas area, and he was trying to wrap his mind around this whole suicidal tendency thing. And the analogy I gave him, I think, is very appropriate. I said, the best way I know how to explain people that are struggling with suicide is when my wife and I, at 9/11, were watching the World Trade Center towers. Of all the things that bothered me the most, it was when I saw those people and there was smoke billowing out the windows. And those of you that watch the footage, you remember what I'm talking about, because you would see those people, obviously they weren't going to make it, jumping to their death. It was horrific. Absolutely horrific. No, those people didn't want to die, but for them it was the only way to escape the pain that was behind them. I can't help but believe there's people in this room that understand what we're talking about. Well, the first thing we see here is about the man. We see the man was possessed by demons. We see he was consumed by physical and spiritual darkness. We see that he was suicidal. But I want to switch gears and now go to the encounter. Here are the disciples. They've just seen this incredible miracle of the winds and the waves. And man, they're on the biggest high they've ever been on. They don't really realize that Jesus has an agenda, that they're not there by accident. And so the boat hits the shore. The disciples come out, and the next thing they see is this man, this raving, barbaric man with no clothes, and he's running full speed. Must have been quite shocking. Absolute evil and absolute good are just about to wage war. You know, when I first read this, it bothered me. I'm like, it doesn't make sense, because I know that darkness doesn't want to be around light, and so that bothered me. Why would a man who's demon-possessed, who lives in the cemetery, who's cutting himself with stones, why would he run to Jesus? And in my research, I found out that archaeologists have done some excavation, and they have found these exact tombs. And guess where they're located? The Sea of Galilee. You remember the story about the winds and the waves that Jesus calmed? Guess where it happened? The Sea of Galilee. It only stands to reason that this man must have been up there in those tombs, and then he sees Jesus calming the winds and the waves, and he comes to the conclusion, if he can calm the winds and the waves, maybe he can calm the storm that's in me. And he's running towards Christ. For him, there's no doubt who Jesus is. For the demon inside of him, there's no doubt who Jesus is. The religious people, they can debate. The crowds, they can debate. But evil knew exactly who Jesus was. And in all of Mark's gospel, the first person who calls Jesus the Son of God is this demon-possessed man. Hey, if there's anything that you get out of what I say today, there's something I want you to hear, and I want you to hear it crystal clear. Sometimes church people make other people feel like that they've got to be good enough. And that Jesus is so proud of the people that are real religious and seem to have it all together. Well, let me tell you something. That's not true. Jesus made the statement in Luke 5:32 when he said, I did not come for the righteous, I came for sinners. Hey, I want you to understand something. Some of the people that you would want to run away from, some of the people that you would not want to be associated with, some of the people that are crazy and they're broken and their lives are a complete wreck. Guess who Jesus came for? Those people. If you're broken this morning, if your life is a living hell, if you're surrounded in darkness, if you've made all the wrong mistakes and you're living with regret, if you look in the mirror and you feel like you don't lost who you became and you don't like who you are, hey, let me tell you something. Jesus is looking for you. So, well, Jay, how do you know that? Well, number one, he said, I came to seek and save that which was lost, Luke 19:10. Hey, let me quote you a verse that explains exactly how Jesus feels about broken people. Luke 4:18. I'm going to quote it exactly the way Jesus said it, word for word. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has sent me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to, listen, heal the brokenhearted, preach deliverance to those who have been held captive, recovery of sight to those that are blind, and to set free those who have been bruised. That's what Jesus said. In essence, he said, I came for broken, hurting people. I didn't come for the people that have it all together. I came for people that have been hurting. And you know, Jesus also said in John 6:37, you say, well, would he really accept me? Jay, you don't know me, man. My life is such a wreck, man. I come from bad stock. I am bad stock. Hey, Jesus said, nobody that comes to him, he will cast away. Man ran to Jesus. Wish I had longer. I wonder this morning if I met you, if I went out to lunch with you today, what are you running to? This man ran to Jesus. I've met all kinds. Some people run towards acceptance. Some people run towards forgiveness. Some people run towards prescription pills. Some people run towards alcohol. Some people run towards pleasure. Some people run towards sex. Some people run towards pornography. Hey, what are you running to? And have you run to it long enough to realize how empty it is? Oh, there's pleasure for a while, man, but it never lasts. The encounter, the first thing we see is the man, he runs to Jesus. I love the second thing, and man, it's about to get good. Luke 8:28 tells us this, that when the man gets near Christ, he bows down. He bows down. It's not only a surrender of the man, but it's a surrender of the demons that are within the man. I got to tell the football players, I'm assuming this is the football section, is that right? All right, I got to tell you guys something real quick. I'm going to deviate. This is just for the football team, but I think everybody can. So a few years ago, I get invited to Ruidoso, New Mexico. There was somebody at this church that heard me speak. They owned a home in Ruidoso, New Mexico. They asked me to come speak at a men's event. I'm like, yeah, man, I'm all in. Several thousand people, big old Coliseum. Yeah, man, let's go. I did not know that one of my heroes, a guy that played for the Dallas Cowboys, he is going to be a Hall of Famer unquestionably. Played on the offense, big dude. Now I'm 6'6", guys. Obviously I'm not that big, but I'm tall. This guy's like 6'4", and I'm telling you, his arms are bigger than my legs. He's massive. And I've watched this guy for years running up and down the field in Dallas, Texas, and I'm not exaggerating. Very rarely would you have ever seen one guy tackling. I don't want to say his name because I'm not a guy to throw around names, but I'm telling you right now, oftentimes there'd be 2 or 3 people on his back riding him to the end zone. He's a legend. So I met this guy, and I'm not really a person who's enamored with people, you know, get all that stuff, but it was pretty cool meeting him. Anyway, he got up to speak, and I'm sitting in the very back, and I knew he was going to talk about football and about the Cowboys, and I wanted to hear about it. But I also knew that this was an event about Jesus, and he never said a word about Jesus. I was sitting back there going, man, I wonder if this guy, does he even know who God is? I got to speak. I was a closing speaker that night, and this guy sitting right on the front row. And so anyway, I normally don't do this, but because it was a men's event, and men are oftentimes too proud to, they think they know everything and don't want to admit, they need help. And so I did something I normally don't do, and I said, hey, if you're serious about giving your life to Christ, I'm going to ask you as men to get out of your seat and get on your knees. We'll find out who's real. We'll find out who's really serious about knowing Christ. Here this guy is, Hall of Famer, Dallas Cowboy, front row. The first person to get out of his seat. He gets down here. I mean, this dude's massive. And this dude gets down on his knees. Tears are running down his cheek. Everybody in the auditorium knows who the guy is. And a thought runs through my mind. The biggest, baddest men on the planet couldn't bring him to his knees. But when he got in the presence of Jesus, that's all he could do. Well, that's what we see in the story of this guy. Man, he gets near Jesus, and so immediately he runs and he bows down. There's no other choice. The night that I got saved at 21 years of age, that April 5th night, first thing I did, man, nobody asked me to do it. I was so broken, man. Nobody had to convince me I was a sinner. Nobody had to convince me I was suicidal. Nobody had to convince me I needed help. I just got on my knees and I said, Jesus, come into my life. I am a sinner. Forgive me. And this man, here he is, he's on his knees, he's before the Son of God. And man, you can just see now, I can hear the cries and the moans in all likelihood as he's bowing down before Christ. Hey, I want to make something, I want you to hear me this. The Bible says in Revelation chapter 7 that even the angels, with all their power, even the angels bow down before Jesus. And there's a group of verses in Philippians 2, 10 and 11, and I want to quote them to you. It says that at the name of Jesus, listen, every knee will bow and every tongue will confess of things in earth, things under the earth, things above the earth. They will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord to the glory of God the Father. You say, Jay, I don't believe that. Hey, friend, you may not believe, but do you know one day every single one of us, some of you football players, you big, rough, tough guys, according to the Bible, one day every single one of us are going to be forced to get on our knees and admit that Jesus is the Son of God. And we can do it in this life or we can do it in the next. They bow before Christ. Yeah, as much power as the demons have, and they have power, but man, when they get in front of Jesus, they know they don't have the kind of power that he has. The story continues to unfold. The demons ask two things. Number one, they say, hey, can we go into the pigs? Isn't that fitting? As vile and disgusting and filthy as you are to torment humanity, yeah, of all animals that you should go into, it should be the pigs. And Jesus says yes. The second request bothers me. Jesus, please don't torment us. Oh, you didn't have a problem tormenting this man. You didn't have a problem driving him insane. Didn't want to be tormented. Well, then the last thing we see in this encounter, we see that he runs to Jesus. We see that the demons bow down. They cower in the presence of the Son of God. And then we get to the last part. The man receives Christ. It's not just some intellectual belief. Yeah, I believe in Michael Jordan. I don't know Michael Jordan. It's not some intellectual belief. No, it's a commitment of a relationship. He recognizes that Jesus is God's Son. He recognizes that he's a sinful man. He recognizes that the only way for a real life is the Son of God, and he becomes a true believer. Not somebody that just gets up at an award show and says, oh, yeah, thank God. Not somebody that just prays a prayer when they get in trouble. Not somebody that just goes to the Baptist Methodist Church and gets sprinkled or baptized. No, he becomes a true believer in Jesus, and he commits his life to Christ. He understands that Jesus is God's Son. And I love this part of the story because, you see, for a long time I thought I knew Jesus, but I didn't. And let me tell you this. If you say you know Jesus and you don't want to spend time with him, you don't know Jesus. You don't know him. You may know about him, but you don't know him. This man, once his life is transformed, because the Bible says that when you really meet Jesus, you become a new person. It doesn't mean you become perfect. My wife's over here on the right-hand side, and so are my kids. They'll tell you I got a lot of flaws. I got a lot of mistakes. There's a lot of things in my life that need work. No, it doesn't mean you become perfect, but what it does mean is your life has changed. And so this man, here the Bible says he's sitting down. He's no longer naked. He's sitting down. He has clothes on, and he's in his right mind. And Jesus and the disciples, they go to get in the boat. And so he walks over to Jesus and he does what people who love Jesus do. He says, I want to go with you. Now, for me, I would think he would want to go home and see mom or dad or brother or sister or grandma or grandpa. But no. No, I just want to be near the man who changed my life. Now, what you would think, had you not have listened to me read the story, that Jesus would go, you know what? We need a man like you. Good followers are hard to find. We'd already had this group of 120. Many of them bailed. They said, your teachings are too hard. We quit. You would think that Jesus would say, hey, absolutely. Come on and join us. We only got 12 of us. We can always use another guy. Let's roll. No. Jesus knows there's a mama back home that's been crying at night. Jesus knows that there's a father like me that probably was brokenhearted because his son not only has disgraced the name, but he's lost his mind. He's in complete torment. And Jesus says in verse 19, he says, no. You're not going with me. You go home to your friends and you tell them about me. Matter of fact, the scripture says that he went throughout Decapolis, the whole region. He wasn't ashamed. Oh, what are people going to think about me talking about Jesus? I don't want to offend anybody, and I don't want anybody to think I'm weird. And it's important in college, that everybody accepts me. And it's important that my Instagram account, continues to grow. And if I talk too much about Jesus, or if I tell people what God did in my life on Sunday, it might rub some folks the wrong way. No. He doesn't have formal education. He doesn't have a seminary degree. Matter of fact, he has a cemetery degree. That's what he has, because he's been in the cemetery for years. And he starts going around. He's not ashamed. He doesn't care what you think. He doesn't care if it doesn't work at college. He doesn't care if people in class don't like it. All he knows is his life has been changed, and he's going around telling everybody about Jesus. That's what happened to me, man. I wasn't going to be no preacher. Get real, man. My dad's a businessman. But on that Jesus, everything changed. So as we come to the final conclusion, this is where it gets weird, really weird. So Jesus tells the guy no. And this is what's mind-boggling. So you would think, if you weren't following closely, or if you had not read, you would think, man, this is one of the greatest miracles that's ever happened. I bet that town got on fire. Everybody was excited about Jesus. Everybody wanted to know who he was. It was no longer just this cool thing to do on Sunday, but no, people want to know who he is. No. Now, granted, they had lost their livestock. The pigs, when they got possessed with demons, they were like the man. They just wanted to end it all, dove off the cliff and drowned themselves. So they say to Jesus, the demon-possessed man, Jesus, I want to go away with you. The people of the town, Jesus, I want you to go away. I want you to understand something about Jesus. He's not like some of the guys that you met at college. He's the perfect gentleman. Jesus has never in all of history, and nor will he ever, force himself on anyone. Every single person in this room and the people that are watching by TV or Facebook, every single one of us have an opportunity to say yes or no to Christ. The townspeople said, we don't want you here. Now, was it because it was going to change their lifestyle? Was it because they lost the pigs? Was it affecting commerce? Was it because they were afraid what people would say at school? I don't know. All I know is the people of the town said, you know what? We're afraid of you. Leave. Jesus didn't enter into a debate, say, no, I really need to stay. No, I'm going to force myself on you. Guess what Jesus did? He got in the boat and he left. And you can search all throughout this book and you will never find one other occasion where he came back. Listen, I know very few people in this room, but I'm going to tell you what I do know. I know that there is a limited opportunity for people to say yes to Christ. Some of you, I was in my closet yesterday praying about this. Some of you may have multiple opportunities. You may have hundreds of opportunities. And for some of you in this room, this may be the last opportunity that you ever have to receive Christ. Some of you, you may never walk in the door of a church again. You may never hear the gospel again. They told Jesus, go away. And that's what he did. And you know what this morning boils down to, whether you're in this room or whether you're watching by TV or on, you know what it boils down to is this. Every single one of us have to make that decision. You say, well, Jay, I don't have to make any decision. Yeah, you do, because not making a decision is a decision in and of itself. You got to make a decision to say yes or no to Christ. Either you got to say, Jesus, I want to grow with you, I want to go with you, or you got to say, Jesus, I just want you to go away and leave me alone. There may never be another opportunity. That was told me that April 5th night. It wasn't a scare tactic. The guy said, some of you grew up in church, you've been in church your whole life. You know all about Jesus. You can quote John 3:16. And he said, some of you, you grew up religious and you don't know Jesus. And at that moment, I knew that I knew that I knew that I didn't know Christ. He invited people. He led people in a prayer. It was people that really wanted Christ in their life. He led them in a prayer. It was packed out just like this room is today. He led people in a prayer. And then he asked people, if you're serious and you're unashamed, get out of your seat and come forward. Forget what everybody else thinks. Who cares? I was sitting in the balcony because I walked in ashamed. I didn't even want anybody to know I was in church. I was sitting in the balcony. I noticed a dude on the bottom row. I used to play basketball against him. I hate him. A little bitty dude. I didn't like him because I didn't mind smoking dope. I got no problem with that. The problem I had was he was smoking dope and it was always bringing the cops heat on us. And I didn't like him. I didn't even know he was there. I was sitting in the balcony and that guy asked people, if you want Christ in your life, stand up. And the very first, I kid you not, no exaggeration, the very first guy that stood up was a guy named Barry, the guy I used to play ball with down at the street park. That night, I was one of dozens of people who went from being religious to being saved. I'm going to ask every head be bowed, every eye be closed. I'm going to ask everybody to bow your head and close your eyes. Now, I'm only asking you to do this because I don't want you to be distracted by anything that's going on around you. I don't want you thinking about what's happening later today or what happened yesterday. For just a minute, I want you to just close your eyes so you can stay focused. And I want to ask you an honest question. It was the same question that was asked to me at 21 years of age that April night. I want to ask you the same question. The speaker said, do you know without a doubt that Jesus Christ lives inside of you? Do you know without a doubt that you have been forgiven of your sins? Now, again, let me remind you, my mom was a Sunday school teacher. Let me remind you, I'd been baptized on 3 different occasions at church camps. But when he said, do you know without a doubt, I knew that I didn't know for sure. And so he said, hey, if you're here this morning and you don't know for certain that Jesus Christ lives inside of you, he said, I want to pray for you. And that's what I want to do for you this morning. With every head bowed and every eye closed, would you just for a minute be honest like I was? And that night when he asked, if you don't know for sure that Jesus Christ lives inside of you, he said, just raise your hand. I'm not going to embarrass you in any way, but I want to pray for you. I raised my hand. With every head bowed and every eye closed, I wonder how many of you would be honest. And again, I will not embarrass you in any way. But right where you're seated, you would say, Jay, I don't know for sure. Maybe at one time you thought you were a Christian. Maybe you're a good Catholic or Methodist or Presbyterian or whatever. But you would say, Jay, I don't know for sure. If that's you, nobody's looking around. I'm not going to embarrass you. If that's you, would you just lift your hand and say, Jay, pray for me. I don't know for sure. Just lift it up high. Just lift it up real high. I mean, there's dozens and dozens of people all over this room just that have their hands up. Anybody else? Just lift it up high. There's dozens of people. Just keep it up. Anybody else that would say, Jay, just to be honest, I don't know for sure. And by the way, you're not the only one. There are dozens of people. Say, Jay, just pray for me. I'm not sure. I don't know. Anybody else want to raise their hand? Say, Jay, pray for me. I'm just not sure. People are still raising their hands. Still raising their hands. Still raising their hands. Anybody else? Lift it up high. It's hard to see in these, but people literally are still raising their hands all over this room. Anybody else? Jay, pray for me, man. I just don't know. I don't know. People still raising their hands. Anybody else? I don't want to miss anybody. There's literally hands all over this room. Not exaggeration. There's dozens and dozens of you. Anybody else? I don't want to miss anybody before we move on. Jay, pray for me. Wow, hands are still going up. Anybody else? Jay, I'm just not sure. Hands still going up. All over this room, still going up. Anybody else? Jay, I just want to be honest, man. I don't know. I just don't know. You may put your hands down. I can say, there's no exaggeration, there would have been dozens and dozens and dozens of you. Literally from right in the front all the way up in the balcony. Those of you that just raised your hand. Hey, listen, I was there. That was me. I had my hand raised. I was honest like you. I don't know. Yeah, I've been to church. Yeah, man, I've been dunked, but man, I don't know. Those of you that raised your hands, and only those of you that raised your hands, would you lift your head and look right this way at me? If you raised your hand, just lift your head. You don't have to worry about anybody seeing you because there's people all around you that did the same thing you did. If you raised your hand, just lift your head and look right this way at me. Nobody's looking at me unless you raised your hand. Just look right this way if you raised your hand. People all over this room. Anybody else? I would say I can't make eye contact with all of you because there's so many of you. Everybody else keeps their heads bowed except those that raise their hand. You just keep looking right this way. I want to make something clear to you this morning. 2,000 years ago, God knew this day was going to happen. It might be that your whole life was leading up to this moment. 2,000 years ago, when they drove 6-inch spikes through his wrist and 9-inch spikes through his feet, when they beat him with a cat o' nine tails, when they cleared their throat and spit in his face, it was for you. It was for you. And this morning, Jesus, in the same way that his boat landed on the shore of that man's life, has now landed on the shore of your life. And this morning, he wants to adopt you into his family. All the mistakes, all the baggage, whatever, all the hurt, all the pain, all the confusion. This morning has led to this, where Jesus Christ wants to bring you into his family, give you eternal life, not just a ticket to heaven, man. He wants to give you a new beginning. You say, well, Jay, I don't really know if he'll forgive me because, man, I made a lot of mistakes. Well, all I can tell you this is your sin is never greater than his forgiveness. Jesus himself said that whoever calls on his name, he would save them. Jesus said that no one who comes to him, he would cast them away. And so this is your morning. This is your opportunity to say yes to Christ. It doesn't matter what anybody says. It doesn't matter what anybody thinks. You may be sitting next to a boyfriend. It doesn't even matter what they think. What matters is, will you walk out of the room this morning with Christ in your life? It's more than just believing here. It's believing in here and being willing to say, Lord, I know I've sinned. I've turned my back on my sin. And I want you in my life. It's no specific words. It's your heart of willing to give your life to Christ. And so I'm going to ask you to do something. Some of you won't do it. You'll be too afraid what other people are going to say. You'll be too nervous about the crowd. Every single person in the Bible, when they met Jesus, they did it publicly. There was no undercover FBI. We don't want anybody to know. Every person who gave their life to Jesus, they went public. I call it the privilege to go public. I believe that if you really mean it, you mention it. It's funny, we'll take a stand for a lot of other things. Why would we not take a stand for Christ? So I'm going to ask you to do something that's not going to be easy. I've asked people all over the world to do it. I'm unapologetic because I believe there's something unique about taking a stand for Christ. So this is what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you in just in a minute, my buddy's going to start singing, and I'm going to ask you to get out from where you're seated, stand here at the front facing me. You're not going to sign up for anything. We don't want your money. We care less. You're not becoming a member of this church or any other. I'm going to ask you in just in a minute, when I finish praying, he's going to start singing immediately. I'm going to ask you to get out from where you're seated. You're going to come down here to the front, and we are going to pray together, and you're going to invite Christ in your life if that's what you really want to do. Nobody's going to embarrass you. You're not going to be asked to give a speech, announce your name to the crowd. No, it's your way of saying, I want Jesus Christ in my life. And it's you getting out of where you're seated and coming forward. And then we're all going to pray together. And then I'm going to give you for free just a booklet, a little booklet I wrote. If you truly want Christ in your life, this is your opportunity. Either you can go with him or you can go away. I'm going to ask every single person in the audience stand. Every single person stand up quickly. Everybody stand up. So this is how it's going to go down. I'm going to pray. The second I say amen, my buddy's going to start singing. And I'm going to ask you to be, you don't need to say nothing to nobody. Just be quiet. Make your way right down here to the front, and we're going to pray together. And Jesus Christ we're going to pray together, and you're going to invite him into your life. Don't wait to see who else is coming. It doesn't matter. It's your turn for Christ to change your life. Father God, I thank you this morning that there are literally dozens and dozens of people all over this room who said they're not sure that they know you, but they want to. Spirit of God, give these people the courage to make their stand for you. In Jesus' name, amen.